Hey, good morning. We're preparing for another day of tearing cupboards out and putting stuff in and working on our kitchen. And I'll be doing some sermon prep today too. So it's Pastor Joseph Dominic here. And if you don't know what that's about, you should take a look at last night's devotion, begging the Lord for things. Uh, so just a little inside joke. Um, I think we're going to stick in Mark 5 this morning. So yeah, it's an incredible chapter, and it edifies me when I read it. So I'm going to share some of the things with you that I've seen as we go a little further into the chapter. I've got some pu'er here. Um, I had pu'er yesterday morning, and I've mentioned before the great thing about good tea is you can get a number of cups and some from 2 grams of high quality pu'er. I can get 5 or 6 mugs of tea. So I get to enjoy it over and over again. So get yourself something. Let's start the day together. Let's spend a few minutes in scriptures. And once you're settled, turn to Mark chapter 5. Once again, Mark chapter 5. And starting in verse 21, Jesus moves from the last scenario. He goes across the sea. Great crowd of people thronging around him, and the crowds are getting bigger and bigger. He's getting more and more famous. And there's a woman in the crowd that has this discharge, and she believes that if she can just touch his garments, that she'll be made well. And in verse 29 it says, "And immediately the flow of blood dried up. She felt it in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him immediately, turned about in the crowd and said, 'Who touched my garments?' And his disciples said to him, 'You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, Who touched me?' And he looked around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease.'" Then moving on in verse 35, he says, "While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house someone who said, 'Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?' But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, 'Do not fear, only believe.' And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, 'Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child's not dead, but sleeping.' And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, 'Talitha cumi,' which means, 'Little girl, I say to you, arise.' And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this. And he told them to give her something to eat. And we read this passage, and again, if we don't understand the context of everything that Jesus is doing, we might miss the bigger story. There's some healing in here. The woman that reaches out to touch him and has faith. But just before that little incident, a ruler, the local governor, came up and said, "My daughter's sick, and he's worried she's going to die, and he believes Jesus can heal her." And so in between is this little incident where the woman is healed. And Jesus feels the power go out of him. Now, we can make this all about the power of healing, and certainly Jesus has that. But what is being established is Jesus has the power to heal. The power is in Jesus to heal. And so to heal what? Well, certainly to heal this woman of her physical ailments. And I've said this before, certainly Jesus heals. Is he obligated to heal? No, no. But when we hear that Jesus heals, a lot of times we have to ask ourselves, what does he heal from? And so there's a story being told here, and we have to see the story. The story starts out with the little girl, and it ends with the little girl. It starts out with the little girl being sick, and then it ends up with the girl dying. So the flow of the story is the girl is sick. Jesus demonstrates that he has the power to heal. And then we find out the girl's dead. And then Jesus raises her up from the dead. So Jesus has the power to heal from the ultimate sickness, death. Later on, we're going to find out that Jesus has the power to forgive us from sin. And the consequences of sin is death. So when we hear that Jesus heals, whether he heals us physically or not, whether or not he heals somebody we're praying for physically or not, we know that Jesus has the power to heal them from the consequences of sin, which is death. And that's what we see in the little girl. It's Jesus just giving a little peek into the fact that he has the power, he felt the power flow from him, to heal death, to raise people from the dead. And he's going to demonstrate that spectacularly when he raises up from that tomb. Jesus has the power to heal us from the worst thing that could happen to us, is dying from the consequences of our sin. He has victory over sin and death. And we get a little peek of it right here in Mark chapter 5. I hope that edifies you. I hope that carries you through your day. May you walk in the power and the presence of the Spirit today. May you be sensitive to the fact that he is with you and in you and flowing through you. And may you be blessed today. I love you. I miss you. I'll talk to you tonight.